And we're excited to hear from Ashley Sanders. Give it up.
Thanks everybody for being here early in the morning. And thanks Phil for what you said, that was wonderful. I was looking at the program and I realized it says I'm the founder of Move to Amend, and I just want to correct, I helped launch it, but I'm not the founder. I hear you have to wear weird wigs when you do that, and I'm just wearing a weird skirt, so that's all. But I did do an experiment today, and for the first time in my life, I wrote down my thoughts, so we'll see how that goes. So we're here today to talk about, amongst other things, community power, if we have it, and how to get it if we don't. I've been a community rights organizer for a long time, and lately I've been thinking a lot about two different stories. And the first one is sad, and you probably haven't heard it before. And the second one is inspiring, and Phil just talked about it, and we've heard a lot about it. Both stories, I think, contain keys to demonstrating true democratic community power. The first one, I'm not even sure if it's true. I was told it late one night by a traveler, so let it be real or let it be an anecdote or a parable. A few years ago, a Canadian woman went to a public lecture on climate change. What she heard devastated her. She went to the library and read more. She was even more devastated. She was so devastated that she went home, went to her basement, and locked herself in. She stayed down there for months, grieving. She lost her job, and she almost lost her marriage. Her friends all left. Finally, she reemerged. By this time, people were talking. The news media was there for her resurfacing, and they had a lot of questions. Why had she done it? Was she crazy? Why so extreme? She looked at the cameras, confused. She asked, what did other people do when they found out the world was ending? The second story is a lot of stories in one. For decades, dictators ruled Tunisia and Egypt. They starved people and made obscene amounts of money. They used the military to enforce their wills. They operated in secrecy and denied people basic freedoms. Then one day, someone took to the streets, and another, and then another. Soon people were everywhere. Soon the dictators fled. Soon the streets of Egypt echoed with chanting, "Down with Mubarak." He dug in, the people stayed, and finally, the third week of shouting, the whole country changed. People sang and stomped, and the revolution spread like wind. People in America asked each other and me, why can't we have Egypt here? A few people in Wisconsin didn't ask. They went ahead and did it. But most of us were flummoxed. Where is our community power? Where is that spark? How do we do that? And now today we are gathered to celebrate the actions of Tim DeChristopher, and we want to know the same things. How did he do what he did? How can we do the same thing? I share these particular stories because I think they contain some answers, and I think they actually contain them in order. We have to get real before we get free. Like the woman in the basement, like the Egyptians under Mubarak, like Tim DeChristopher himself, we won't get free until we can be honest about the state of our world and the state of our democracy. Telling ourselves the truth and mourning it, even when it is hard, is what frees us to be joyful and effective. So we must be brutally honest before we can be brutally effective. And we must grieve our slavery before we can overthrow it. We must admit that our democracy is a sham so that democracy can live in us, so that there can be that spark, so that democracy can become the drug that it is that makes you go back and back and back because you can't get enough of it. So the first part of this talk will be us in the basement. It will be us asking, is democracy illegal in the United States? The second part will be joyful and maybe a bit scary. It will be saying, so what do we do? So let's get real and then let's get free. I'm going to start with what I know best. I'm a community rights organizer, which is a little different than being a community organizer. As a rights organizer, I get people to believe that they have the right to say what they do and don't want in their communities, and to create that reality through powerful people's laws, through asserting their sovereignty and rights over corporations. So I'll use some examples of people doing this from around the country to see what sovereignty looks like and to see if we have a real democracy in the United States. A few months ago, the city of Pittsburgh passed a law that banned fracking for natural gas within the city. They also passed a resolution abolishing corporate personhood. In 2006, yeah, it's pretty awesome. In 2006, the town of Barnstead passed an ordinance that banned corporate water mining within its limits. From 2006 to 2008, citizens of Blaine Township in Pennsylvania passed laws banning coal mining, laws that required businesses to publicly disclose activities, laws that asserted that corporations do not have constitutional rights. In 2006, the voters of Humboldt County, where I've done a lot of organizing, passed an ordinance banning non-local corporations from contributing any money to local elections and declared corporate personhood illegitimate. The list goes on, with communities passing laws protecting rights of nature, etc. The last one, which I think is particularly relevant here with everything going on with Kennecott, is in 2008, the city of Naukamixon, Pennsylvania, drafted an ordinance banning corporations from mining or even owning land used for mining. The ordinance also made pollution a form of trespass, restricted corporate rights, and protected the rights of nature. Pretty damn cool. So I share these laws because they're people's laws and they're amazing, but I also want to talk about a few things they have in common. First, they're powerful. Second, they're effective. Third, they declare people's sovereignty. And fourth, they are illegal. Yes, you heard me. All these laws, according to the United States Constitution, are unconstitutional. But how can this be, you might say? How can it be illegal to defend our health, our air, our water, and our communities? These laws are illegal precisely because they are powerful and precisely because they ask the question of sovereignty, or who should rule in a democracy. They are illegal because they are effective, because they challenge and dismantle the vast systems of property, wealth, and privilege that are destroying the planet. These laws are illegal because they are about people, and because no matter what you heard in school, our legal system and government currently are not. But wait, you might say again, we do have a democracy. The law and government are just and stand for me. After all, I vote. We have a president. My answer to this is, we do not have a democracy, we have a decoy democracy. We have a political system that controls us as effectively as a dictatorship while distracting us with the forms of free government. We have what many empires work to achieve, a system where the democratic rhetoric and institutions gain strength as the reality of true democracy disappears. Remember, don't get depressed, we're getting real here. Be patient and we will get free. And besides, you don't have to take my word on the democracy thing. We can do another test. I want you to ask yourself today, what if you really believed the words of the Declaration of Independence? It is, after all, our country's founding document, and we pay lip service to it every day. So let's simply ask ourselves, is the premise of the Declaration possible today? Are we living it if it is? Are we able to live it? We can start with the first paragraph. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, and that to secure these rights, governments are instituted amongst men, deriving their just power from the consent of the governed. So according to our nation's founding document, you and everyone in this room are valuable equals with unquestionable rights to life, liberty, and happiness. Life, liberty, and happiness. And your government exists only to grant you those things. Yeah, you're saying, I had high school civics class. I know all about this. You might know the words, but do you believe them? Because if you believed them, you would have to start asking yourself some hard questions. You'd have to start with the first line and ask yourself, is my government for me? Does it exist expressly for me and other people? Is it of me? Is it by me? Which would make you ask some other questions. Would a government that existed for me go to two wars in my name, even when the vast majority of the population opposed them? Would a government of, by, and for me deny me basic health care so that the rich can get obscenely richer? Would my government, mine, slash funding for the poor and vulnerable? Would it decimate the natural world, meet at summits to stop climate change and instead destroy the planet some more? Would a government buy of and for me, deny me clean air, clean water, real food, and a real future in the name of property? And if it did, would a government for, of, and by me arrest me for trying to stop it, for fighting for my human right to live, for the right of the planet to exist into the next century? Would it arrest me and put me in prison for 10 years? Would it shoot rubber bullets and sound noise machines and spray pepper and raid me and jail me for simply trying to stop corporations from destroying the planet, even as it met with those corporations up the street? And you would have to conclude that no, your government does not exist for you, and no, the law doesn't either. Somewhere in all this historical mess, the line life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness was replaced with the pursuit of property, and this changed everything. You are not free because property is more important than you. Property, the elaborate fiction that certain people, by owning little green dead slips of paper, can own living things like land and animals and humans, is more important than you. It is more important than your right to breathe. It is more important than your right to live. And it is certainly more important than your right to be free, to decide what your community should look like, or to be happy, to exercise creativity, to solve problems. From the earliest days of the United States, this has been true. Property is more important than anything, and the legal and cultural and political might of the country was used to get people to believe it. This might strike you on the surface as outrageous and absurd. How could anyone believe this? But the answer is disconcerting. Most of us do, in the way we behave in our democracy. We believe, for example, that people with wealth get to own property, and that people who own property deserve to dictate the present and the future to those without it. We believe that a legal fiction of power is more important than we are, that these legal fictions are more important than our rights to clean air, water, health, and a livable future. We concede to these legal fictions power and purpose, letting them participate in our decisions, our schools, our communities, and our democratic processes. And we have been convinced by the combined might of culture, government, law, and media that we as citizens and members of community should cede our sovereignty to these legal fictions, even though we are human, and we were here first. The only difference is that we no longer call this fiction merely property. We call it a corporation. And when corporations, legal fictions with unprecedented wealth, power, and size rule over us, democracy is illegal, because it requires us to believe, to truly believe, that this fictional creature is more important than our own dignity, worth, and experience. Unless you didn't believe this, which I hope you don't, in which case you would have to go back to the Declaration of Independence to find out what to do. You'd have to be brave and read the next line, because even the white and wealthy Thomas Jefferson knows what to do when the government fails its people. If a government is not yours, you must abolish it and build another one. Or, in Jefferson's words, whenever any form of government becomes destructive to these ends, it is the right of people to alter or abolish it and to institute a new government. No, really, you have to alter or abolish it. Jefferson didn't say, if a government isn't serving you, it is your right to go to endless and rigged hearings and speak into the mic for 2 minutes. He didn't say, it is your right to sit down with heads of corporations and beg them to harm you less. He didn't say, it is your right to keep voting for the least worst and hope things will change. He didn't say, it is your right to accept the rules of the wealthy and bow your head, trying for a scrap here or there. He said, it is your right to alter or abolish that government. So we say that we live in a democracy, but we don't. We live in a plutocracy. Are we doing everything in our power to alter or abolish that? Are we using our rights? Or are we just pretending, like many leaders of this country, to believe in democracy while the real power flexes and grows? Is it merely comforting to repeat the words of the Declaration like a mantra or a rosary to ward off reality? Because reality is, again, that you are not free, your government is not yours, you do not have the right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, and you must, according to what you believe, rise up. You must break bad laws. You must declare your sovereignty. But most of us are not revolting. Most of us talk about democracy as if it is a thing to be secured, rather than a dignified way of living. We struggle under so many tyrannies, but we do not alter or abolish them. And why is that? Jefferson had the answer to this too. All experience hath shown that mankind are more disposed to suffer while evils are sufferable than to right themselves by abolishing the forms to which they are accustomed. We are not revolting because we are colonized. In other periods of time, it was more effective for the elite to control the masses through outright violence and overt control. But that is not nearly as effective now. It is far more effective these days to colonize our minds, to get us to accept and even support our own enslavement to corporate masters, property owners, government leaders, and the elite. They get us to bear unbelievable fictions of power and unbelievable harms by making us accustomed to them. So that when a corporation comes crashing into our community and demands the right to blow up our mountains or mine our valleys or set up oil and gas rigs all over our beautiful wilderness, we barely make a peep and often defend their right to participate in our political process and beg for a right to mitigate their worst atrocities. As historian Lawrence Goodwin says, he puts Jefferson's words another way: the elite's ultimate victory is nailed into place only when the population has been persuaded to define all conceivable activity within the limits of existing custom. Such a society can genuinely be described as stable. Thenceforth, protest will pose no ultimate threat because the protesters will necessarily conceive of their options as being so limited that even should they be successful, the resulting reforms will not alter significantly the inherited modes of power and privilege. Protest under such conditions of cultural narrowness is therefore not only permissible in the eyes of those who rule, but is, from time to time, positively desirable because it fortifies the popular understanding that society is functioning democratically. Colonizing our minds means getting us to believe that we have no options except the options presented to us: grow or die, warm the planet or starve. Colonization is a narrowing of possibilities that benefits the rich. So when we agree to let corporations rule over us, when we agree that they have rights and that property exists and that it is the most important thing, when we accept that our only voice will be at regulatory hearings and in letters to Congress people, when we accept that our laws defend the wealthy and powerful and our government does too, when all we can ask for in the face of these atrocities is for a little transparency or more public notice or small change, then we have lost even if we win. We have, as Goodwin says, learned to see all of our options within existing power structures. Goodwin also says something else interesting. He says this process of colonization is no accident. It isn't just that things like regulatory hearings, for example, which, by the way, I go to anyway masochistically, even though I'm writing this, it isn't just that they get us to believe that, or strip us of our sovereign right to decide. It is that they perpetuate the belief that democracy exists, that we are doing something, and that we are being listened to. And this persistent belief that a democracy exists when a democracy is absent is the greatest tool that the elite use against people in a free country. And every year that we agree to participate in this farce is a year lost for people's rights on the planet. The point of power is not always to crush and enslave people, because sometimes that's easier to recognize. The point is to get them accustomed to their own powerlessness by getting them to have the wrong conversations. Most of the time, the most effective thing to do is to change the conversation so that no one is talking about sovereignty. Jefferson spends a lot of time in the Declaration talking about how patient the colonist has been with the king and the British Parliament, how long-suffering and civil. For years they had said, "Please, dear king," and "Thanks, dear king." But they found out something pretty quick. The king never listened, because he didn't have to. As long as the colonists accepted a huge assumption that kings were sovereign and spoke for God and that they deserved their tyranny, they could not effectively fight him. It was only when they made the move from reform to resistance, the move from asking the king to pretty please harm them less, to questioning monarchy itself, that they were actually effective. Interestingly, this was the same move from being a colonist, someone who was colonized, to being a revolutionary, someone who was free. It was also the move from accepting control to demanding sovereignty. So these days we aren't fighting kings because kings are no longer necessary. But we are fighting the same thing. We are fighting obscenely rich, wealthy people and their desire to rule and destroy the world. This time around, the vehicle is the law or corporations or the government itself, but the point is the same. We must make the same move as any revolutionary movement. We must recognize that we are colonized. We must change the conversation in our heads from one of docility to one of demands. We must make the move from being colonists to being revolutionaries. And we must do this by changing the terms of the entire conversation, by talking about our sovereignty. And yes, if we do that, if we start doing what the towns across America were doing that I mentioned earlier, if we question property, wealth, culture, and the whole corporate system, we will become illegal. But that is the point. True freedom is always illegal because true freedom defies systems of control. True democracy is always illegal because democracy is an attitude, a form of self-respect, not an institution designed to convince us we are valuable when we are not. True democracy is nothing short of being fully alive and defending the fully living. It is not a mass of dead institutions using dead logic to pretend that their dead and artificial creations, their Frankensteins, are as important as we are. That's what Jefferson says. He knows that people get accustomed to atrocities and control, but he says that we have to act anyway, whenever a long train of abuses and usurpations, pursuing invariably the same object, evinces a design to reduce us under absolute despotism. It is our right, it is our duty to throw off such government and provide new guards for future security. It isn't just our right, it's our duty. And this from a man who owned slaves, who was obscenely wealthy, who was white and propertied. Surely we can do better. After all, Jefferson's list of abuses inflicted by monarchy is eerily similar to the list of abuses inflicted on us by corporations and the political systems that support them. So why don't we revolt? Lawrence Goodwin thinks it is because in America, mass resignation represents a public manifestation of a private loss, a decline in what people think they have a political right to aspire to. In essence, a decline of individual political self-respect on the part of millions of people. In other words, we don't revolt because we don't have enough self-respect to be outraged when our sovereignty is taken from us. We don't revolt because we are resigned, accustomed to our slavery. We don't revolt because we do not truly believe that we have the right or the duty to revolt when our government is not for us, by us, and of us. We don't revolt because we really don't believe the Declaration of Independence. And we don't believe the Declaration of Independence because we don't believe in ourselves. We don't believe we are already free, naturally sovereign, born with actual and inalienable rights. And in our despair, we convince each other not to step up, stand out, do what we must to protect each other and the planet. We're gathered at this summit to stand in solidarity with Tim DeChristopher, a person who saw clearly that the law and government weren't helping us any. He saw what was at stake, an entire planet, our future, and he broke the damn law. He broke it because it was wrong. He broke it because it defended the powerful. He broke it because he had self-respect, true democratic self-respect. He broke it because he knew that democracy was illegal, that our health and our safety and our futures were illegal. He broke it because he was realistic enough to know that the government wasn't for him, of him, and by him. We say he is a hero. We say he is a dreamer. We say he is special. He isn't. He is nothing short of the most normal, refreshing, honest, and realistic person I have met. We are the dreamers if we believe that somebody else is coming to save us. We are the ones who need heroes if we each refuse to do what we must. And we are the egotistical ones if we believe we can do nothing special. A true democracy requires a daily revolt in all of its citizens. A true democracy is not a cult where we worship the brave, but a community of bravery. If we really want to stand with Tim, if we know the real meaning of solidarity, we will find it in ourselves to admit the hard truths he admitted to himself 2 years ago, and do whatever it takes, not whatever they say it takes, to make this world right. To get back to the subject, it will take community power. It takes an entire community of people, of us, breaking bad laws and making good ones. It takes whole cities revolting against corporate power structures. It takes massive municipal civil disobedience. It takes a re-declaration of independence, first in our minds, and then in our body, and then in our body politic. It is the difference between asking for a socially responsible king and demanding an end to monarchy. It is the difference between asking for a voluntary slaveholder code of conduct and demanding the abolition of slavery. It is the difference between asking for women's political advisory groups and demanding full equality and the right to vote. It is the difference between asking for transparency in corporate campaign contributions and demanding an end to money in elections. It is the difference between asking for a carbon trade and demanding an end to coal power. It is the difference between property and people, between money and wealth, between death and life, and between slavery and sovereignty. So we've been in the basement and we've established that we aren't free. We've gotten real, and maybe it was depressing, but now it's time to get free. But as we have learned, getting free is a process of decolonizing our minds. And when we have done that, we will have to clear our throats. We will have to get used to talking like free people so we can act like them. That is why we need a redeclaration of independence, for those times in the course of human events that it again becomes necessary to dissolve the political bands of our servitude. The first part of getting free is to stop thinking like a corporation. Stop thinking like our masters. Kill the CEO running the successful business in your brain. And when you do that, put your declaration down on paper, submit your grievances, and wage a revolution. I used to dream of making a shirt to wear to conservative family parties. On the front, it would say, "I am no longer accepting the following arguments." And on the back, it would list all the arguments I refused to accept. A declaration. We need the same things for our dignity and our communities, a declaration of our principles of community rule, a document that casts off mental colonization. Here's mine. We don't need experts, we need experience. We don't need jargon, we need a poetic morality. We don't need PR, we need the truth. We don't need the powerful, we need the power of the powerless. We don't need everyone, we need ourselves. We don't need permission, we need expression, and we don't need institutions, we need the real thing. Then we get down to business. We need to pass an amendment to the U.S. Constitution banning corporate constitutional rights and asserting the right of the people. And more importantly than that, we need to get communities all across the nation to do what resistors have done in this country for hundreds of years on their own or in groups. We need them to pass resolutions and ordinances banning corporate personhood and asserting their community rights. But more than that, we need a federated, powerful movement of massive municipal civil disobedience. Cities and towns and counties saying a resounding hell no to the corporate power structures that are destroying the planet. We can do this. People are already doing this. We can start here, and Tim has helped us to start. And if we do, we can honestly say that today and in the future, we stood with our friend and ally, Tim DeChristopher, and that we took the democracy drug and never looked back. Thank you.